Hi guys, I'm Amy, and welcome to my podcast, Spill the Teeth, where I spill the tea on all things dentistry and a bunch of other fun things. Welcome to episode 7. So, where did we leave off last time? We left off the week before I left for spring break, and now it is week 12. We are in the double digits, which means we are rapidly moving towards the end of the semester, which also means that I am very close to my summer semester, which means I am very close to seeing patients. I know, scary, right? So I'm going to try and use the rest of the weeks that I have to learn as much as I can in lab and get better at hand skills before I treat actual real life people. So you know the drill. I'm going to start off with what I did over this past week, and honestly, this was a tough week just because, coming back from spring break, I've gotten used to not really doing anything. I did do a little bit of schoolwork, but I had embraced the slug life, as I like to call it. And yeah, coming back to school was not fun. But let's move on to the interesting stuff that I did this past week. So, fixed, I've been working on anterior bridge design, so number 9 to 11 with a Pontic for number 10, and we've been working on a progressive case for that, such as preps, scanning, designing, and this past week I've been doing Pindexing, which if you don't know what Pindexing is, it is just not a fun process. It involves doing an impression, PVS impression, then pouring it up, and then doing Pindexing stands for pin indexing. So you put pins into a trimmed cast off of your impression, and then you index the cast into certain sections. So for the 9 to 11 prep, we did different, they're called dies. So we did dies for number 9, 10, and 11, and then we had segments cut in the rest of the arch. It is not really a fun experience because you have to pour up the cast, then you have to trim the cast, then you have to do the pin placement, which is always nerve-wracking. If you ever used a pin placement machine, I'm actually not really sure about the official name for it, but it's kind of nerve-wracking to use the machine, and then you have to saw or use like a saw drill to get your indexes into the cast, and that is nerve-wracking too because based on how much space you have from the margin of your crown preps to the adjacent tooth, it can be pretty tight, and you kind of just have to go for it. But I was working on that and thankfully got it signed off, but yeah, it's not a fun experience. I've done that 3 times already, and it never gets any better. In operative, we've been continuing on with our anterior aesthetic cases, so I think in the last episode I had done number 7 and 8, and so I did 9 and 10. So I prepped them for composite veneers and then made the composite veneers over them. And honestly, 9 and 10 turned out a little bit better, just because in the last episode I talked about how number 7 ended up being a really wide tooth, just because the canine next to it was really skinny, so I had to close the gap by making it really wide, but there wasn't much of a gap that I needed to fill, so it turned out to be a normal lateral incisor. Now, we were supposed to get through with 6 and 11. I only did 9 and 10, but if I have more time over the weekend, because I'm not really doing much stuff in lab other than kind of moving forward and other stuff, I might work on that, and then I could shape number 7 to be more of a normal width of a lateral incisor. But we'll see when I get to the weekend and what I am supposed to or going to be working on. In RPD, we had gotten our frameworks back for our case, and from the start of the semester, we've kind of been working in reverse for this case because the framework was designed before we did the preps, so we already knew what preps we had to do rather than figure them out ourselves. So our cast came back from the lab and we had our frameworks, so we had to try them in, and then we had to make a custom tray and then do an impression. In endo, we did a CSDO and filling with IRM for, I think it was an anterior. I should probably know this, but again, it's been a long week. It was an anterior, it was a canine because I remember mine was really long. So we did that, and that went okay. In perio, after the lab that we had before we went off to spring break, we were in lab again, and this time we were practicing scraping off calculus with our instruments that we had gone over. So To practice this, it is kind of an interesting dentiform. I don't know what types of dentiforms other dental schools have, but we have this perio dentiform. It's specifically for perio, and they put this like black stuff under the gums, so under the silicone, I guess, that is surrounding the teeth, and it's supposed to mimic calculus. Of course, calculus is not usually, I guess it can be, but not usually black, but it is for this case, so you can see and assess how well you are at removing calculus. So we practiced that. We went over the different instruments that we would need to remove the calculus. So that was really all the interesting stuff that happened this past week. Like I said in the first episode, I have a lot of other classes, but I just choose not to talk about them because it's usually lecture based and I don't really want to go down the list of all the lectures that I had to do, and it's just an exhaustive list, to be honest. So let's move into the hot and not of this week. I think the not definitely was going back to school. I know that sounds terrible. I love school, don't get me wrong. I love learning. I love being in school. I love dental school. But after a week of not having to do a lot of that stuff, it was just a lot being thrown back into a full packed week of classes and just a lot of lab. So definitely trying to get the energy back up, but it was definitely not, I'm not going to say it was not a great week, but it was definitely hard. Let's just put it that way. It was definitely hard coming back to school after spring break, and I'm sure a lot of my classmates felt the same way. The hot of this week was that there were a couple of days that had some nice weather, and it has been some weird weather. I'm sure if you live in the Midwest, you know our ups and downs of weathers, and ups and downs really within the same day. But there were some days that were nice, and I think it's getting nicer out. I think today was like the high of 60, and it's been sunny, so that's been nice. I'm just so very much done with snow. I hate the cold, I hate snow, I feel very strongly about snow. If you talk to anybody who knows me, they will tell you I despise snow. I actually just do not like the sight of it falling, and I don't like it on the ground. I just don't like it. And that probably comes with the fact that I was born in Vietnam, and, you know, we don't get snow there. But that's a story for another day with how I got to this country. But spoiler, I'm adopted. But even though I came here when I was really young, I think I like to say that it's still in my genes and DNA that I'm meant for warm weather. So yes, I don't enjoy the snow. And it's kind of nicer here down south. I'm in southern Illinois, where I'm originally from is the suburbs of Chicago. Not Chicago, but the suburbs. And so it is nicer. So while I'm coming off the back of spring break, I know it's already been a week, but I'm still thinking about spring break. I miss it. I want to be back home. But since I'm already on the topic of spring break, let's go over what I did over my spring break. So I know a lot of classmates of mine, at least, and a lot of other people go on trips, and that's great and all. I don't really need that. I just went home very promptly on the Saturday after my classes got out from spring break. So for me, that's about a 4-hour and 15-minute drive, 4 hours if I'm really pushing it on the interstate, which I do. And that time is usually spent with just listening to music and having my own little concert in the car. So when I go home, my voice is a little hoarse, and it's just because I've been singing for 4 hours straight. It also helps keep me awake, so yeah, there's that. So I'm going to break up this segment by the things I did, the food I ate, the movies or TV I watched, and the books I read. So, for the first thing, the things that I did. So, I did a whole lot of nothing, and that's a good thing for me because I'm always studying, so it's very nice to just not do anything. And there were a couple of nice days when I was at home, at least, so I was able to sit outside in the backyard and soak up the sun. That is one of my favorite things to do. I'm not an outdoorsy person, but I like just sitting outside and reading. Not even reading, I just like sitting outside and watching the world go by, as it were. I also got to spend time with my family and hang out with my sisters, so that's always a good time too. Because before dental school, I was lucky enough to go to 2 colleges, because I went to community college, and then a 4-year college that I was close enough to home to be able to commute, but this is the first time for me actually being away from home, so it was nice to be back with my family. Two of my sisters are also getting married this summer, and I got to go with one of the sisters to go to her first wedding dress fitting. So she's already got the wedding dress, but she went to the person who's gonna do alterations on it, so I got to go there, and it was a really cool process to watch and kind of related to dentistry, because as she was doing the pinning and tucking and all this different stuff on the dress, she talked about doing like illusions. So in dentistry, as one of my fixed prostonic professors said, that we are magicians, so we can trick the eye into seeing what we want them to see. One of the things is kind of the example I would use would be the composite veneers, especially the one that I did on number 7, which was really wide. But I was able to hide that because I put the line angles where they normally are and then tucked the rest of the tooth behind that line angle, so it looked like a normal width of a lateral incisor from the face-on point of view, but if you look from the side, it would just be the widest tooth ever imaginable. But I have tricked the eye into seeing a normal width lateral incisor instead of a wide one because of where I put the line angles. So she was talking about putting boning in different places to make the illusion of the waist look thinner, and not that my sister is not thin, but it's very interesting to see how those things are similar to what they are in dentistry, how someone who is altering a dress is using the same principles we use in dentistry in a very similar way because it is very artistic, and not that I'm good at art. I don't claim that I'm good at art. I'm actually not very good at art. And for people who say, if you're good at art, go into dentistry, if being good at art was a prerequisite to dentistry, I would not be in dentistry. You do not have to be good at drawing to be in dentistry. I can't even really draw a tooth, to be honest, or freehand draw a tooth. I know that's kind of actually sad, but I really can't. You don't want to see my attempts at freehand drawing a tooth. They're not good. But I think of dentistry as more of a functional art. You're definitely creating art because I think a lot of things can be considered art, but you're doing it in a way that it's functional and it makes sense. Because not all art is functional, but dentistry has to be functional. So the way the teeth are, the way the teeth look, they have to be functional. And guys, I don't even remember what was the second thing on the list, mostly because if you're watching this, this is a different day. I could not finish recording this podcast when I wanted to because the neighbor kids were screaming outside my window. So it's the next day, but it doesn't really matter. So I'm just gonna, I think, go with the foods I ate, which I ate a lot of good food because it's always nice when you don't have to cook something and that your mom cooks stuff. So that's what I was looking forward to as well. I had mochi cake, I had cream puffs. So if you know anything about me, my family doesn't celebrate really St. Patrick's Day. My family celebrates St. Joseph's Day because we are Italian influenced, or well, I am because I was born in Vietnam, not Italy. But our tradition is to make cream puffs, or my mom makes cream puffs, and although St. Joseph's Day wasn't until March 19th, so that was after spring break, my mom made an early batch so I could enjoy some cream puffs, and I did, and she sent some back to me. I unfortunately have eaten all of them, so that's a big sad, but they were very delicious when I did have them. I also had Portillo's, so if you're not from Illinois or not from the Chicago suburb area, Portillo's is a staple fast food place, and it has delicious food. I personally get a burger and fries, so I had that, and also Panda Express, because there's not really a close Panda Express to me. Either way, it's like 30 minutes, and I have to go on the interstate, so not a fun experience to drive there, so I went to Panda Express 2 times when I was home. The third thing on my list, I think it was like the movies I watched or the TV shows I watched. And for TV, I didn't watch a lot of TV shows. I do watch some TV shows, and that's something I'll get into another episode, things I like to watch, but I'm not really watching a TV show right now. I did watch Kraven the Hunter, which I don't know if you guys have heard the stuff around Kraven the Hunter, but it was not a good movie. For me, it's more about the writing, and I've mentioned in previous episodes that I love to write, and the dialogue I thought was just really stiff, and the acting was a little strange. The storyline was a little weird. I'm not a huge Marvel person, so I don't really know the backstory to Kraven the Hunter, but yeah, it was kind of cringy, and I don't recommend watching it unless you really like Aaron Taylor Johnson. Another movie that I watched was The Predators. So me and my brother, when I'm home, we've been making our way through the Alien and the Predator series, and so that was our last movie that we had to watch in the Predator series, and I thought it was pretty good. I know there are some things said about the Predator and Alien series and how they've gone downhill, but personally, I don't mind them. I actually really like, knowing it's the same monster, whatever, it's pretty much the same story, but I enjoy it. Now for the books that I've read. Now, if you listen to my podcast or watch the podcast that I was talking about books, you know that I had a lot of books that I planned to read over the break. Well, not a lot. A lot for me is like 20, but I definitely did not read 20 books over break. I think I read only like 4. Scratch that, I only read 3. So I read the book that my school did for their blind date with a book, and that was Holmes, Marple, and Poe by James Patterson. And honestly, that was a pleasant surprise. I didn't think I was going to like it. The characters were definitely a little quirky and definitely named after, well, their namesakes, and I think he was definitely writing the characters to be like that, but actually I quite enjoyed the book, and I discovered that there is actually a second book in the series, and so I really want to read that. Another book that I read was The Whispers, and I had already read a book by her called The Push, which was really good, and this was also very good. It was very sick, very twisted, very psychological thriller, as I like it, so I quite enjoyed that book. The third book that I read was The Chamber by Will Dean, and honestly, it was a very good book. It was a mystery kind of, there's these people who are deep sea divers, and for some reason, people in their deep sea, whatever thing that they're diving from, start to die, and they're the only ones there. So it's like, who's the murderer in this very limited space? And it was a good read for sure. It kept you wondering who it was going to be. But for me, I felt like it was a cheap cop out at the end when we discovered who the murderer was. And I know some people who have read the book, they probably like that. They don't mind the ending, and it definitely was an interesting ending. But for me, the ending to a book can kind of make or break it. And so, like, up until that point, I think it was a 5 out of 5 for me. But then when I discovered the ending, I was like, oh, this is like a 3 out of 5. And that's only really happened to me one other time. And I can't really remember the name of the book, but it was such a good book all throughout it. And then when you discovered why it happened towards the very end, I was like, really? Like, you spent all that time building the suspense and the plot twist and whatever, and then it was just like this cheap solution to the problem. So for me, definitely the ending can make or break a book. So for The Chamber, I would have given it a 3 out of 5. For The Push, I would give it a 5 out of 5, and for Holmes, Marple, and Poe, I would definitely give that a 5 out of 5. So now that I've spilled the tea on all things dentistry and what I did over spring break, it's time to leave y'all with some food for thought. And this week, since I am looking outside my window and seeing how sunny it is, my food for thought is to go outside and enjoy the sun. I'm not sure where you're listening to this from, but if you're able to, if it's sunny, if it's warm, just go outside and enjoy the sun. I think for people like us, we tend to be stuck inside all day, especially if you're a dental or medical student or STEM major or whatever. But definitely go outside, enjoy the sun, take a walk. Definitely is good for your mental health. Well, that's all for this episode. Thank you for watching or listening, or both. I really appreciate you. If you have any questions about dentistry or other fun things, I would love to answer them, so just DM me on Instagram or send me a carrier pigeon, and I will definitely answer them for sure. That's all for this episode. I will see you in the next one.